So in this video I'm going to cover the inputables and the alarms, and then the collisions are going to be the next video, and they're going to be their own video because it's a very complicated system, obviously. So let's look at the inputable base class. So the inputable base class is pretty similar to the updatable and drawable, but it gets obviously more complicated in the .cpp. In the .h, however, we have an enum specifying what kind of or what type of event it is, and then we have the deregistration and registration for the type, and then we have as we can see, it gets pretty complicated in here with the pairs because of the fact that for one key you could have it being not registered for release and registered for being pressed. So you have to have two registration states for every key. So as we can see here, it is a couple steps to get up here. So here we have registration states and the key info. And then finally, when you get to the final top, so we'll just head down from here. You see the key map is Azul. Is Azul key, because obviously you're not going to have, and keep in mind this is the inputables base, because you're not going to have the key needed to be repeated in this multi-map, so you can just have it used as the key. The Azul key be used as the key. And then we got the key info here. As we can see, key info is the registration state, and the delete references are the delete reference for this inputable for the key, and we'll see that used a little later. In the registration states, we got two registration states. One's for key up, one's for key down. And here we have the delete reference, which is a place in the list of inputables in the inputable manager. And there can be two places because it can be registered for up and down. Yeah. So here's the user made key pressed, key release. This is how we submit the key registration and deregistration right here. And now we'll go into the .cpp. So we can see, let's start out with registration and then head back up to deregistration. Well, actually, let's start out with the submits. So this is what the user's actually calling. They're calling submit, and then this is getting the current scene and sending this to the input manager, which then gets the the iterator from the registered keys for K, and goes in and deletes it from the reference. And then scene manager, get current scene, register, much simpler. Here we go. Registration. Now this gets pretty complicated in here, so let's take it real slow. Here we see the and just to be clear, it doesn't go straight into registering and deregistering. The registration, we'll peek the definition here, actually creates a command for it. So we actually are using these commands. So here we go. Submit command. Oh, I did this back, or I talked about this backwards. Whoopsies. Whoopsies. These are called from the commands. This is called from the user. My bad. I got mixed up for a moment. I believe I did point them out correct on the .h, but yes. Okay, here we go. So as we can see, it submits a command to the command broker. I was getting really worried for a moment there because I'm like, that's not actually what is happening. Anyway, I'm sorry. I got confused for a moment by my own code. Yikes. Anyway, so it's searching the registered keys for the key that it's registering, just so that we can find out to make sure that we're not going to double register it, obviously. So if it finds it, go in here. If it doesn't find it, it creates all these things. So what it does is if it finds it and it needs to be pending registration, it will set the pending registration, because it won't delete off if you just pull the registration for it. It deletes off at the end. Yeah. So if it's key pressed, it creates those things. If it's not, if it's key released, it creates the registration state and the delete reference and the key info, and inserts it into the key list. And keep in mind, once again, we're still in the inputable base. For deregistration, it finds to make sure that it actually has the key, and so if we have the key, then if it's key pressed, pend registration, else if it's released, pend deregistration, and then submit the command with the inputable, the Azul key, and the event type. Now let's look at the input commands. This might end up being its own video on its own, because it was more complicated than I remembered. Anyway, the commands, very simple. Once again, execute, input registration command. This carries the key, the inputable, or a pointer to the inputable, and the type, and it sets them right in its constructor that is called in the input key registration. So here we see the proper order of things. Input, submit key registration. There we go. Thus showing these are called near the end. So let's go into the input manager and scope it out. So obviously we got the basic methods here: register, deregister, default constructor, destructor. I use a unordered map of keys and their inputable, or the single key pointer, because once again I don't feel like it has to be ordered, and the unordered map allows me to do searching by the key, and then I can call the single key, the press and release one after the other. Okay. It's getting copy constructor, assignment constructor equals delete, because we only want one per scene, and the storage list. Yeah. So let's get to it. And process list. So the register for it, storage list reference single key, storage list find key. So we're making sure that there's actually one in there. If it's not at the end, so it's already been registered, as in the key has already been registered, the Azul key, and it just registers the inputable type, or the inputable, and what type it is, right with the single key, which we'll look at in a second. If it's not in there, it creates a new single key, gets a single key, or gets a delete reference for the single key, so that we can actually delete the single key when it's empty, and then registers it. Deregister, it's find, it finds the single key, goes to the second, and then goes to into the single key, deregisters. Deregistration command. Input manager, we delete all the single keys. Process list, we go through our single keys and we process key event. Now the single key, here we see deregister, register, process key events, and the list of inputtables. I didn't feel like it really needed to be ordered once again. Default constructor, we should never be using that, so it's delete. And then the constructor using the Azul key. Stores the key, obviously. And yeah, delete reference, key down, key released. Two different lists, obviously, of inputtables, key down and key released. So now, register. If it can find or when it finds the key, it goes in here. If the type's key released, we go into the storage reference for the key and set the registration states, or make sure that the registration state is correct. As we can see, I don't use an assert here. It's a bit gentler not to, because I figure if it's already registered, you know, no need to completely kill them. And then key release dot insert, and we make it currently registered with the registration data. So here we go again, pending registration. This is for getting the key down dot end. We place it at the key down dot end, and then it's currently registered. Deregistration, very similar, except I do use assert because I don't want to be deregistering something that's not actually registered. Key release dot erase. Here we see my use of the delete reference right here, so I don't have to go searching through the whole thing. And once again, currently deregistered. These registration statements get rid of the search times, as we've seen in all of my ables, and so I don't have to go searching through the list every single time. And now we see the and here is the key down. Process key events. This is the processing for the key, obviously called from the key manager, or inputtable manager. Right here, it's called on all of its single keys. And what it does is first it processes, first it checks to see if the key state has changed. So if it hasn't changed, if it was down and hasn't changed from being down, it won't do anything. However, if the key state has changed, then it will do something, and it changed the key state to the opposite state, obviously. And then based on what state it's in, it either calls key pressed or key released on the inputtable in its list. So yeah, that took that was a lot more explanation than I figured I'd need, but it's a good amount. We'll go in here. We'll look at documentation real quick. Obviously, this is very similar to the regular inputtables, a little more in depth because of the kind of strange registration. But the user really doesn't need to know about that. And most of these things that the user doesn't really need to know about, I have not documented very well because they don't really need to know about any of it. It's really more for in-engine things. That being said, I have documented every single function in the entire code. So yeah, here's the processing events, registration, command. So yeah, that was the documentation for all 4 of those. So I'm going to stop this video here, and then next we will look at the collision system, and then after that the alarm system, probably in 2 separate videos.